Hello and welcome to the Child Psych Podcast. I'm Tanya Johnson. So excited to have Dr. Ross Greene here with us today. Welcome, Dr. Greene.
Thanks for inviting me to do this.
Yeah, we've been so excited. I'm going to introduce Dr. Greene and then we're going to jump right in. Dr. Greene is, hold on one sec, where did that go? One second, sorry. Dr. Greene is the New York Times best-selling author of the influential books The Explosive Child, Lost at School, Lost and Found, and Raising Human Beings. He is the originator of the model of care described in those books, now called Collaborative and Proactive Solutions. Dr. Greene was on the faculty at Harvard Medical School for over 20 years and is now the founding director of the nonprofit Lives in the Balance, which provides a vast array of free, web-based resources on the CPS model. Welcome again.
Thank you again.
Yeah. So, Dr. Greene, so many questions for you today. I think where I would like to start is in my own experience of your work. I came across your words that said, kids do well when they can. And even as a clinician now, when I sit with families, I always hold it very close to my heart because I think it changes how I work and in turn how families then approach more challenging situations in their world.
It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
It helps us move away from what is instinctive for many caregivers, which is to believe that this kid is misbehaving on purpose. If they just tried harder, they would do better.
Mm-hmm.
All the things that caregivers think about concerning behaviors that aren't true. The kid is being manipulative, attention seeking, coercive, is unmotivated, is testing limits. If instead we are viewing this kid as someone who would very much prefer to be doing well, that frees us up to look at not what we are imagining is going on here, but what the kid's concerning behavior is telling us, what they're struggling with, and what's getting in their way. And
Mm-hmm.
that tends to be a much more productive way of working with and living with and viewing kids who are struggling.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Greene, before your work took the world by storm, I think there was very much a behavioral approach to parenting, to teaching. Why do you think we often slip into looking at the behavior instead of looking at what's going on underneath?
Well, the behavior is what's going on right in front of us. We've been trained, many of us, to focus on the behavior. It's what everybody talks about. And you know what? B.F. Skinner had quite an impact, and he told us that behavior is what we should be focused on, and that modifying behavior is what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And while I think that B.F. Skinner had a very important impact on kids and parenting and discipline, I think we've learned a lot about kids post B.F. Skinner that's really important. And probably the most important thing we've learned is that kids who are exhibiting concerning behavior are struggling with certain skills that are critical to helping us human beings respond well to problems and frustrations. Skills like flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation. B.F. Skinner did not have the advantage of the research that has accumulated over the last 40 to 50 years telling us about those skills. I have had that advantage. And that has informed my thinking tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it helps determine what a kid's frustration response is going to be. And if a kid is struggling with those skills, they are going to have what we might call a big, or what I sometimes call an unlucky frustration response. That's usually in the form of concerning behavior: hitting, spitting, kicking, biting, throwing, destroying, running, etc. And those are the kids who often get the worst our society has to offer when people are primarily focused on the kid's behavior. But
Mhm.
when we recognize that those are frustration responses and that the kid is frustrated about something, and that the something the kid is frustrated about is an expectation they're having difficulty meeting that's being placed upon them by their environment, then we can start focusing on those expectations and help
Mhm.
kids meet them, something that will never be accomplished by focusing on behavior and trying to
Mhm.
modify it.
Mm. What I love about that is it sees the whole child. It says, I see all of you. I see that you're struggling, that you're frustrated, and how do I connect with you instead of how do I punish you or how do I give you a gold star? And tomorrow you're not going to meet that criteria, you're not going to get the gold star. And then we have these loops. We have loops that go on and on.
And what's interesting is the whole child also has strengths. The whole child also has circumstances in which they are not exhibiting concerning behaviors. And that's very informative as well, because it tells us this kid is only exhibiting concerning behavior under certain conditions, conditions in which they are having difficulty meeting certain expectations and are also having difficulty using the skills to show us that they're having difficulty meeting those expectations in a way that is adaptive.
Mhm.
That's kind of the whole package. That's the whole child.
Mm, beautiful. I think so often we do see that. We see a child who does great when they're at home, but not so great at school, or vice versa, which tells us that those skills are there, but there's something within that environment that just isn't working for that child.
Or even great under some conditions at home and school, and not so great under other conditions at home and school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's really informative. This is why, supposedly I'm an expert in a disorder known as oppositional defiant disorder, because I've published research on that disorder. But what I started recognizing early on was that kids who I was working with had only part time oppositional defiant disorder.
Ah,
And that
interesting.
got me thinking, if you only have part time oppositional defiant disorder, do you really have a disorder at all? Or are there just expectations that we can identify proactively that you're having difficulty meeting? Of course, in my work, we call those unmet expectations unsolved problems. If we can identify those problems proactively, we can solve them proactively, get ourselves out of the heat of the moment. Um, Much better.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, I wonder, can I throw a scenario at you and then we can have a look at what an example of an unsolved problem might be?
Sure.
Okay, so I have two little girls, Una and Maya. I'm going to talk about Maya today. Maya is 5.5. She's in full day kindergarten. So here in Canada, you can do half day or full day. She's in full day kindy. She's been in full day kindy since September. Great little kid. But one of the areas where she struggles is we have a thing in our house where we call it a 15-minute cleanup after dinner. We put a timer on the stove and everybody has to clean up. We pick up all the toys, everything gets put away. So, yesterday, this is a normal expectation from my perspective. Maya lies down on the floor, flailing around, screaming, I won't do it. So, in that moment, it's hold on, now this is messing with my schedule because we're supposed to tidy, then get ready for bed. So, what ends up happening is she screams for the whole 15 minutes. Everybody else cleans up. We keep going back to try and talk her into cleaning. And eventually the timer goes off, cleanup time is done. And then we reset another timer because now she's decided she'll clean up. So that's what happened in my house as a child psychologist last night. Everything went on fire. And I thought if only my clients could see me right now. But I would love to get your perspective on that using your model or your expertise.
Well, the first thing I should say is that us child psychologists have the burden of thinking that everything has to go perfectly just because we work with kids. I tried to relieve myself of that burden. Even my two threw me for a loop every once in a while. But the unsolved problem, apparently for Maya, would be worded as follows: difficulty cleaning up during 15-minute cleanup time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and here's what the problem solving process would sound like. And notice we've now you've here's what I always say about unsolved problems. They're only a surprise the first time they happen. After
Beautiful.
that, they're not a surprise anymore.
We know it.
So You'd know better than me how long Maya has been struggling to meet that expectation.
Hmm.
But if she's been struggling to meet that expectation for a long time, then we might call that an old unsolved problem. And the reason she's still laying on the ground during cleanup time is because that problem is still unsolved. So we're going to make an appointment with Maya and sit down with her and let her know what we want to talk about. Tell her there's something we're very curious about. We're very curious about what's making it hard for her to clean up during cleanup time. And by the way, even if she sometimes cleans up during cleanup time, if she's not able to do that reliably, it's still an unsolved problem. And here's what that conversation would sound like. Maya, I'm very curious about something. I've noticed that sometimes you have difficulty cleaning up during cleanup time after dinner. What's up? And now we want to hear anything Maya has to tell us about
Hmm.
what's making that hard for her. I don't know Maya. You might know Maya better than me, of course.
Hmm.
Any thoughts about what Maya might say?
Okay, so Maya might say, I don't know. Maya might say, I want to play, or I didn't make the mess, or I'm tired.
Got it. All, by the way, legitimate concerns. One of the things we say in this model is that kids' concerns are legitimate. We don't want to dismiss them, we want to address them.
Mhm.
So we would repeat that back to Maya. Okay, so here's what I'm hearing you say. You could be tired. It might not be your mess. You might want to have some playtime before cleanup time. Um, I don't remember the last thing you said, but that's okay,
Mhm.
right? Is there anything else making it hard for you to clean up during cleanup time after dinner? And that's called the empathy step. There's 3 steps that are involved in solving a problem collaboratively. And I should mention, by the way, that if all we're focused on is the kid's behavior, we never find out what's making it hard for her to
Mm,
clean up
of
during
course,
cleanup time
yes. That makes so
after
much
dinner,
sense.
right?
Hmm.
And a timeout isn't going to give us that information. And sending her to her room is not going to give us that information. Behavior modification strategies do not yield information about what's making it hard for a kid to meet a particular expectation. And that information is golden. We would then move on to the define adult concern step. Now it's mom participation time, right?
Hmm.
The define adult concern step is where you are voicing. Notice not only is your voice being heard in this process, the kid's voice is being heard in this process. As we always say, plenty of room on the table for both sets of concerns. No reason for anybody's concerns to be dismissed or disregarded. Um, why is it important that Maya clean up during cleanup time after dinner?
Because then we get to all wake up in the morning to a clean house because we all made the mess together and we're all a family and this is what we do.
Got it. Wonderful concerns, also legitimate. We would then move on to the third step, the invitation. This is where we are inviting the kid to collaborate with us on solving the problem. But the solution has to meet 2 criteria. Got to be realistic, got to be something both parties can actually do, and even more important than that, it's got to be mutually satisfactory, meaning it truly addresses the concerns of both parties. Here's what I've been saying a lot lately. If the solution, and it's borne out not only by my work with thousands of kids, but by world history, if the solution isn't realistic and mutually satisfactory, I promise you this problem is still unsolved.
Hmm. It's going to
Here's what the
persist.
invitation would sound like. So, Maya, I wonder if there's a way. Before we did this, by the way, we want to ask Maya what the biggest one of her concerns is. So she's not here. I'm going to let you take it in terms of guessing, right?
Hmm.
And by the way, here's what we also say about the empathy step. We tell adults to be prepared for jaw-dropping moments when they discover that what they thought was getting in the kid's way is not what's getting in the kid's way. We're going to take your word for it because Maya's not here.
Hmm.
Which of Maya's concerns do you think she would say is the biggest, getting in the way the most important?
That she wants to play.
Got it. Here's what the invitation would sound like. I wonder if there's something we could do about you wanting to play after dinner and before cleanup time, and also make sure that when we wake up in the morning, our house is nice and clean, and we've done what we needed to do to tidy things up as a family. What we just did is we revisited the concerns of both parties. And then, believe it or not, we're going to ask Maya if she has any ideas.
Hmm.
And not because it's her job to come up with a solution. Um, it's y'all's job to come up with a solution because y'all are problem solving partners. But it's very good strategy. It lets Maya know beyond a shadow of a doubt we're actually interested in her ideas. If she doesn't have any ideas, I'm sure you will. But we're then going to say, Maya, do you have any ideas? And now we're
Mhm.
rolling.
Mhm.
Um, Maya might say, well, any thought? I don't know, Maya. What do you
Mhm.
think Maya might? Do you think Maya would have ideas?
I do
Many
think
people,
Maya
by
would
the
have
way,
ideas.
yep, many people think a 5-year-old doesn't have ideas, but we just launched a new section on the Lives in the Balance website with showing 3-year-olds doing the problem solving process with caregivers. So Maya's at 5 years old, certainly in range. What ideas do you think Maya would come up with?
Mhm. Maya might say a shorter time, quicker time. Maya might say before dinner. Maya might say if her Steffi could help her little Teddy could help her. Um, Maya might say, because she likes me to do things with her, Maya might say, if mommy does it with me, like next to her, right next to her.
Got it. And the one I came up with, since playing was her number one concern, is that she might say, can I play for 15 minutes after dinner and then do cleanup?
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to brainstorm though. We're going to take it one solution at a time and think about with Maya, is that solution realistic? Is it something we both can do? And does it address the concerns of both parties?
Mm-hmm.
If it does, we've got a winner. Now we're going to try that solution. What you get to decide as mom is, does that work for me? Does it address my concern? Is it realistic? And what you get to do as mom is help Maya decide, does that solution work for me, given my concern? And is it realistic? If it is, you're going to roll with it. The first solution sometimes doesn't solve the problem durably, although I'm reasonably confident about this one.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't work, it means that the solution wasn't as realistic and mutually satisfactory as we thought it was. Or it means that there are other of Maya's concerns that were not addressed by that first solution. Um, those are the possibilities. Those are not a failure of the process. Those are a reason to go back to the process. Sometimes, even in real life, solutions take 2 or 3 goes before we have one that's going to be durable. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what the process looks like on difficulty, uh, cleaning up
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Beautiful.
during cleanup time after dinner.
Yeah. Dr. Greene, it's so respectful.
And why not?
Yeah.
Um, by the way, I think showing respect toward kids engenders respect. I think that when we are being very unilateral and very punitive with kids, we are teaching them something. However, we're justifying those actions in our minds as adults, we can expect to get them back at us. But if we are listening to kids, curious, trying to come up with a solution that will work not only for ourselves, but also for them, my experience exclusively is that they will reciprocate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think so often we forget that as adults, what we give to our children is likely what they're going to give back to us.
The old expression is true: you reap what you sow.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating, though. We often are so driven by, number one, responding in the heat of the moment, which causes us quite often to move toward power rather than collaboration. So, a major goal here is to identify those unsolved problems ahead of time, proactively, and solve them proactively. let's get so much of what people are talking about these days, it drives me a little nuts, is what to do in the heat of the moment. And it's fine, I suppose, to talk about what to do in the heat of the moment. Co-regulation, de-escalation, all these things that are very heat of the moment oriented. Um, you don't need that stuff very much if you're being proactive. And these aren't, as I said earlier, an unsolved problem is only a surprise the first time it happens, which means that generally speaking, kids and caregivers are getting into it over the same unsolved problems hour after hour, day after day, proof that the problems are still unsolved, also proof that behavior modification, rewards and punishments, are not problem solving strategies. Um,
Mm-hmm.
let's get people out of the heat of the moment. It's a whole lot easier to collaborate under those circumstances. Um, but if you teach kids about power, you're going to get power back.
100%. And I agree with you. Just being in the field, I know everything is about what do we do, but what do we do when the child is lying on the floor and won't tidy up? But I'm totally hearing you today is that if this child knows they will be heard, they do have a voice, we can do what we need to do to get through that moment. But what actually matters is this conversation that happens afterwards.
And you know, it's very, it's very common. I'm thinking about a kid I'm working with right now who's 6 years old. That once we get into a rhythm with this problem solving process, once it becomes our routine, not the exception, not a one shot deal, but our routine. If an unsolved problem should slip through, one that we didn't anticipate, it truly was a surprise. Don't be surprised if you have a kid standing there looking at you saying, "Is this one we can talk about?"
I love
Or,
it.
"Mom, why don't we just work this out?" Or, "Mom, why don't you and I come up with a solution together?" Right?
Mhm,
Ugh, we need a whole lot more of this. We need to get
mhm,
out of the heat of the moment. Drives me a little nuts.
mhm. And really, this is as our kids develop skills. You're talking about skills at the beginning, all of those kind of executive functioning skills. As our kids develop and grow, really what we want is for them to be able to sit with a teacher when they're having a hard time, sit with a colleague one day. This is what we're trying to model, but it's often very hard for parents to give that to their kids.
It wouldn't be quite as hard if they knew that unsolved problems were predictable, were easily identifiable, and could be solved proactively. We
Mm-hmm,
truly are so caught up in the heat of the moment. We are so caught up in what some people call crisis world that it actually deprives us of our best options, which is a real pity.
mm-hmm. 100%, 100%. And I think so often we end up, like you said, focusing on those rewards and punishments because we're not going where we need to go with our kids.
Or we didn't know we had other options.
Mm,
There's a very traditional definition of what it means to be an authority figure. And of course, it involves the word consequences. And what's fascinating is I've never thought that consequences were a particularly effective way to hold a kid accountable in the first place. Popular though it might be, um, if you want to hold a kid accountable, engage them in the process of solving the problems that are causing their concerning behavior.
mhm,
That's my definition of accountability.
mhm,
Not
mhm,
having kids be the passive recipients of our solutions and our consequences.
mhm. Dr. Greene, do you believe that there's ever a place for consequences?
Well, natural consequences are inescapable and unavoidable and inevitable. If you don't study for the test, you're going to get a bad grade. If you touch the hot stove, my daughter learned this one when she was 2 years old. My bad. We were cooking scrambled eggs together at the stove, and I briefly turned my back. You're going to get burned.
Mhm,
Uh, if you don't share your toys with Billy, Billy's not going to want to play with you. Those are natural consequences. So there is no world without consequences. Where life gets interesting is that kids with concerning behaviors, generally speaking, have experienced more of those natural consequences than most of us will experience in this lifetime. So, what do a lot of caregivers think to do next when those very powerful, very persuasive natural consequences aren't getting the job done? They add more, those of the unnatural,
yeah.
artificial, adult imposed variety. You just lost me. Um, So, can I imagine a world without consequences? No, natural consequences are inevitable. Can I imagine a world where adults know that a kid's concerning behavior is just a frustration response that tells us there's an expectation they're having difficulty meeting, and that that unsolved problem badly needs to be solved, and that consequences don't solve problems? All right, now we're rocking. I can
Mhm.
imagine that world.
Absolutely. You know, if we take Maya again, if we said to her, you haven't tidied up, now you're upstairs in your bedroom tonight, there's no book, lights out, bedtime routine is gone. What's happened in that moment is we've lost the connection. She feels isolated, alone. She has no voice. Yet look at the other world that you're talking about. Look at what's possible.
Maya also wouldn't feel heard, and you would be deprived of the most important piece of information about your daughter.
Mhm,
What's getting in the way for her?
mhm.
You've deprived yourself of the ability to talk with her about that, to work together on a solution and one that works for both of you.
Yeah.
What a shame.
Mhm,
All in the name of power. Um, that's a pity.
mhm, mhm. Dr. Greene, the flip side of that, and we've touched a couple of times briefly on rewards, is it may also be tempting to say we don't use rewards in our house, but it may be tempting to say, day one, here's your little sticker. Well done. You tidied up. You did your tidy up time to give those stickers. Can you talk a little bit on that for me?
Yeah, I don't put rewards and punishments in a different category. Um, I've seen just as many kids lose it over being punished as I have lose it over not achieving the reward they were anticipating on an expectation they were still having difficulty meeting.
Mhm,
Rewards don't solve problems. Rewards don't give us the information we need. Punishments don't solve problems. Punishments don't give us the information we need. I don't treat them any differently. There's still consequences, right? And nothing takes the place of finding out from kids what's making it hard for them to meet certain expectations and helping them learn how to work their way through that. I got to tell you, that is a much more important real life skill than whatever we think we're accomplishing by using power to get kids to do stuff.
mm. I love it. I love that spin that both consequences and rewards are ultimately a power dynamic. It's a power move, right? Because I get to decide you're getting your star now. Whereas actually, I could sit down at the table and say, hey, Maya, I see you. Let's talk about what's happening here for you.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing the research tells us about consequences is that their effects tend not to be durable.
Mm-hmm.
So even if Maya is turned on by a sticker for a week or two, if there's still something getting in the way of her cleaning up after dinner, yeah, you may get enhanced performance over a week or two, but then you're back to baseline. And what have you really accomplished?
Nothing. Nothing. Except now maybe a little bit of a damaged self esteem that we're back in the same thing because no one's really helped her.
There you go.
Dr. Greene, if there was some final words for all the moms, dads, caregivers, teachers listening to you today, what would you leave them with?
What we started with, kids do well if they can. If your kid could do well, they would do well. If your kid's not doing well, don't pay attention to the behavior that simply signals that they're not doing well. Pay attention to the expectations that are being placed upon them that are causing those behaviors. Connect with your kid about those expectations. Learn about your kid. Communicate with your kid. Um, Make a strong relationship with your kids so that they continue talking to you about those things. You know, the number one complaint I get from caregivers, parents, is that their kid won't talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one complaint I get from kids is that their parents don't listen. All right, we can do something about that. And we
Yeah.
can do that at very young ages. It all starts with our lenses. This kid would very much prefer to be doing well. It's not my job to show them who's the boss. It's my job to partner with them on solving the problems that are affecting their lives.
Mm. Dr. Greene, I know that there's so many parents listening today going, oh my goodness, just a shift, a total shift, perspective shift in how I want to do this. Even little Maya, I can't wait for it to get home because there's so much I want to do with little Maya now. Um, But for those parents who've listened in today going, something is shifting within me as I listen to Dr. Greene, where can they find your work?
Uh, the best place to start is the website of the nonprofit I founded, Lives in the Balance. Lives, Lives, in the balance.org. Of course, I have lots of books out there. Explosive Child is more for parents of kids with concerning behavior. Raising Human Beings is more for parents of any kid. And of course, there's books for educators as well, Lost at School and Lost and Found. Not a hard guy to find, but the Lives in the Balance website is the easiest place to start, mostly because there's lots of free resources there.
Beautiful. We'll make sure to link it in the show notes. Thank you so
Outstanding.
much. Yeah, just so beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
My pleasure, and a pleasure talking to you. And I hope your listeners have found this to be helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Greene.
You bet.